Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here today. My name is Lori Massini. I am the General Counsel for Thunderbird Entertainment here in Vancouver. I have been with Thunderbird for about 4 years. Prior to that, I was an entertainment lawyer in private practice. I'm actually filling in today for Jen McCarron, our CEO, who had to go out of town, but I'm super grateful to be here. Welcome to our final session of the day. This one is called Children's Programming in Canada, and we're going to talk about the state of children's programming and offer some tips on how to make you and your content stand out. Again, I'm your moderator. Joined on stage with me for this panel are two lovely ladies and Brandon, lovely gentlemen. I'll pass this over to them to introduce themselves, starting with Brandon.
Hello, I'm Brandon. So I'm a kids TV showrunner, writer, director, and I'm a VP of creative at Balloon House Productions. We make kids content, live action animation for kind of any kid, any age group, which is very important in your age group. First thing to know. And prior to that, I was a production executive at Chorus Entertainment for all their kids channels, Trios, YTV, Teletoon, Adult Swim Canada, which is also fun, but not kids. Know your audience.
Hi, everyone. I'm Becki Brisson. I am the Vice President of Business Affairs and Operations at the Shaw Rocket Fund. So we are one of the certified independent production funds. We're similar to Bell Fund, but our focus is specifically on content for children, youth, and family audiences. So yeah.
Hi, everybody. My name is Michele, and I'm the head of children's programming for Knowledge Network, the BC public broadcaster. We've got kids programming on all day, weekdays from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and weekends from 6 till noon. So we broadcast almost 4,000 hours of programming each year with a very heavy Canadian content quota. And we also have streaming video on our Knowledge Kids website and apps, free, subscription-free apps. So I hope you have the Knowledge Kids app. There you go.
Great, thank you so much. So I guess what we're going to do is start with some themes, and then we're going to leave time for questions. I think it's probably best to keep questions to the end rather than have people jump in partway through, but again, I'm open to suggestions here. So the first theme we're going to start with is what trends is the panel seeing in terms of children's content, specifically themes and genre?
Want me to go?
Sure.
Sure. For kids, I mean, there's a lot of kids are watching on YouTube. For sure. Kids are watching like on broadcast, but outside of broadcast in big numbers. So I think it's a big thing is knowing where your audience is, and a lot of them are watching across. Like it's good for you to be everywhere because they're everywhere. So I think a lot of it is like, and beyond that, there's like anything on YouTube, like you're gonna find your audience in different pockets and different niches. But preschool content's always really hot. Preschool is a good place to be for sure. But I would say like following where kids are watching is a huge thing right now.
And in terms of preschool content, what kind of programming do you think appeals most to that age group?
That's a good question. Well, so for years with broadcasters, you would pitch. So I made a big show called Miss Persona, which was a live-action preschool series with a host. And for a long time, we were told that broadcasters didn't want that type of content. And then we finally got it on, and it did quite well. And you'll find a lot of the big hits on YouTube are also that type of content. You're finding Miss Rachel. I don't know if anyone has kids, but Miss Rachel is massive. Blippy, things like that. So I think you'll find a lot of live-action preschool is working in a way that was written off for a long time. And it seems to be back in a big way. I mean, Paw Patrol seems to keep going, for sure.
Cocomelon.
Cocomelon, yeah, Cocomelon. Yeah, so yeah, Cocomelon. I mean, yeah, just talk to kids, see what they're watching. It's probably a trend right there.
Michele, what are you seeing at Knowledge?
So exactly the same thing Brandon is seeing. We have Paw Patrol. We've had Paw Patrol since season 1. We're now in season 12, going into. And it's still our #1 show. Knowledge Kids has a very defined niche audience. We program for kids 2 to 8, and even 8 is a little bit old because once kids hit the schoolyard, they leave public television and off they go to YouTube or elsewhere, Roblox or whatever. So our audience is very sort of in that preschool demographic. And yes, I would also echo what Brandon said. Kids are watching online. They are not watching on a linear channel. They are early adopters, and we've been streaming our content. We launched our Knowledge Kids app in 2015, so almost 10 years ago. And that's where they're all watching. Our top shows are sort of a mix of Canadian and foreign content. Paw Patrol, Wild Kratts is another really popular one, which is kind of a great idea because it's about animals and there is endless species of animals. So that show, which is now in season 7, could go on forever, especially if the Shaw Rocket Fund continues to fund it. We have a lot of book-based properties on Knowledge Network, so things like Geronimo Stilton, for example. There's a whole bunch of shows that come out of books. We do a little bit of puppet shows, but I have to say they don't work very well. I find that puppet shows tend to skew quite young, and the younger your target audience, the smaller available audience you have to work with, and so puppet shows have a very limited appeal. So I'm not really in the market for puppet shows, but definitely animation is the center of our kids offer. And we also have a certain amount of live action and mixed hybrid live action and animation. Some of it is super high end, so things like Dino Dana, Dino Dan, all of those dinosaur franchises that are great dramas with these incredible CG dinosaurs. That's, kind of at the high end in terms of budget. But there are also lower end, really simple productions as well that find an audience because they have heart and charm and really great little characters. So yeah, if you look at Knowledge Kids, all of the content that we have in our inventory is up there streaming, and you can get all sorts of great ideas for different kinds of shows, different genres.
I have a 5-year-old, so we watch a lot of Knowledge at my house. So I think obviously kind of the main answer is going to be a shift to short form content in YouTube. But what other kind of shifts are you seeing in the Canadian market as it pertains to this newer generation? And I guess maybe it's the preschool demographic.
So one shift that I'm really happy about and really proud of, well, a couple. One of them is more diversity in kids' content, and one of them is more Indigenous-led content, finally. It's been a long time coming. Mm-hmm. Diversity has been really part of the fabric of kids' content for a long time, but you're seeing an expansion of the definition of that diversity. So, racial and ethnic diversity. There's also things like neurodiversity and physical diversity. So we have characters who are in a wheelchair or characters who have autism. We have humans who have autism. We have a raccoon who has autism. There are all sorts of different ways that characters are better reflecting society and kids. And I think that really helps kids to find characters that they love and relate to more. So that's a really nice change and a trend in the marketplace, which I've been seeing growing for several years.
That's awesome. Becki, I kind of skipped over you, but what are you seeing in terms of trends and shifts?
Yeah, so I mean, we can kind of talk about the Canadian market, also a little bit about the global. We're also going to refer to children and youth, but there's multiple audiences within that genre, I guess, audience range. So we talk about preschool, There's sort of primary, elementary age, there's tweens, there's teens, there's what we call family or co-viewing, so that's things that parents and kids can watch together. So the things that we see are really dependent on the specific ages within that. But overall, kids are watching on everything. Like, that's the thing. It's just they're watching on phones, they're watching on tablets, they're watching on TV, they're watching on cable, they're watching YouTube, they're watching SVOD, subscription video on demand. They're watching movie premieres in Roblox while playing the game with their friends. They are, and for kids, they've never been a passive audience. Kids don't just sit, watch something, say, hey, that's great. If they love something, they're going to watch it again and again. And then they want to pretend to be that character, and they want to wear that costume. Then they want the toy. They want to play it in a game. So what we're seeing a lot is brands. So brands are sort of the all-encompassing. It's the series, it's the toy, it's the feature film, it's the video game based on that, it's everything. And so we've seen a big resurgence of that. You've probably noticed it. A lot of the properties that we grew up watching as kids are now rebooted, a new, a new series, a new film. There's video game brands that are coming into the linear platform. There's all that kind of stuff. We're also seeing, in terms of trends, things like gentle programming is what a lot of people are calling it. It's a little bit of a pushback on the specifically engineered type of content that you'll find on YouTube that's data-driven, that they were talking about earlier. Some of that doesn't work for kids, Yes, they will pay attention when it's constant action and really exciting, but sometimes they want a little bit more of a gentle message, gentler programming. So we're seeing a lot of that. Sometimes that ties into content for neurodiverse kids as well. We're also just seeing content that is sort of reflecting the new generations, Gen Alpha, Gen Beta, which apparently is starting this year. Some of the things that are going to be more important for their generation. Climate anxiety is huge. So we're seeing a lot more climate-focused content. We're seeing, a lot more content in terms of media literacy. So teaching kids, what is true, how to check your sources, that sort of a thing. So there is, some new emerging genres and types of programming that's very specific to this new generation of kids that's coming up as well.
I'm just going to give an example of the gentle programming that Becki mentioned. I acquired a series from overseas, from Europe, and there are a whole bunch of songs. It's just little shorts of original and public domain songs, a whole combination of them. And they created two versions. They created sort of the standard regular song, and then they did a nighttime version. So they took a certain number of songs from the series, and they recreated them. They slowed them down, and they put sort of a nighttime filter on, so the whole scene looks darker. So they've delivered to me, the broadcaster, two different versions of some of these same songs.
Oh, that's really interesting. Cool. Yeah, that's super cool. And do you see that that's kind of the future is not just nighttime or multiple versions or gentle programming, but also a move towards more informative media literacy, maybe climate-aware programming? Do you think that's where the trends are headed, more DEI on screen?
So, well, we've got knowledge in our name. So knowledge is our brand. Learning is our brand. So, a big part of our kids' offer is really trying to find that balance between education and entertainment. So, yeah, there is. But definitely, I see climate change programming as well, literacy, numeracy. There's all sorts of different ways. But people, the most successful shows are the ones where kids don't recognize that. They don't recognize that they're learning necessarily. They're just having fun. They're watching it and they're having fun. And whether they're learning about, gravity or dinosaurs or whatever, it's just all thrilling to them. And that's the art of children's programming, is really sort of disguising that early learning in fun characters and settings.
All kids programming is educational, whether or not you think it is. Like, they're sponges, they're mimicking, they're watching, and the fact of the matter is there's so much content out there right now that kids themselves are producing, especially in the tween teens. They're creating their own content. So when we're looking at content that is being made in Canada, a lot of times with our public educational broadcasters, we're really looking for things with a little bit more structure, that are sort of providing a counterpoint to some of the user-generated content that they're consuming at a super rapid rate.
That's really what distinguishes us from, I get pitches all the time of people who want to sell me their YouTube content. And you don't need me. You have YouTube. You don't need Knowledge Network. I need something entirely different. And so, there is a lot of stuff that is made directly for YouTube, that, like the Blippi or the Cocomelon or whatever, that has its place and kids love it, but that's not really what we do. So a lot of the programming on our educational channels, the public broadcasters, often has educational consultants that are involved with it, sometimes cultural consultants, scientists. It depends on what the content is, but there are a lot of sort of people that help look at the scripts, and early childhood kind of development people that will make sure that the scripts are age appropriate, that they're relevant, that kids are going to understand the concept, and that's a big part of the kinds of content that we look for and that we program on our channels and apps.
Awesome, thank you. So we hear how Canada is a powerhouse for children's programming. Paw Patrol, Big Blue, even Caillou was such a success back in the day. Kids Screen as a publication is produced here and is obviously renowned, but a lot of the successful kids shows aren't recognized as Canadian. Children's TV is one of our biggest exports, according to the CMPA's report in 21-22. Why do you think that is, that kids' content isn't being recognized as Canadian?
I think we could promote ourselves better. It's very Canadian to just toss something out there and be like, enjoy.
We're humble.
Yeah, we're pretty humble. And I think it's also part of like what makes us so great at kids' content is that we're like kind of quiet and humble, and we're going to make this thing really great. It's a really important thing. We're going to put it out there and it's going to be great, but we don't really toot our own horn about it. And then kids' content is also just not super culturally specific all the time. Like Paw Patrol, there's nothing places it in Canada. There might be some voices you recognize as sound Canadian. There might be a little Canadian accent there, but like kids' content could be in Candyland. It could be wherever, so it doesn't feel distinctly Canadian all the time.
Yeah.
But I think there's probably some kids' content that does feel Canadian, but a lot of the stuff that has hit has felt like universal. So you're not like, that feels Canadian.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I'll jump in here as well. I think sometimes we don't recognize our own values when we see them reflected on the screen, because they're so familiar to us. But believe me, I watch a lot of content from around the world, and when you see kids shows from places where values aren't the same as ours, it really hits you. And as an example, I'll just cite, some programs I've seen where parents discipline their kids in these cartoons by spanking them. And when you see that now, it is so something we don't do here anymore. And so, I think one of the strengths of Canadian kids programming is our values, our strong values that come through, and in some ways are universal, and that's why a lot of our programming exports really well. I'm also going to flag another technical kind of issue in this regard, a limitation, and that is that a lot of animation, which is super, super expensive to create, gets created as a co-production, sometimes a two-way, sometimes a three-way co-production, and occasionally some of these shows get quite watered down. You might have accents from somewhere else. If you're partner is an Australian co-producer, your show might end up with Australian accents, or writers in France, or whatever. So sometimes the downside of doing these co-productions is that it is harder to maintain some of that Canadianness and voice.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I'm in my experience, I'm used to seeing, treaty co-productions with Australia. What other countries are you seeing Canada partner with in terms of treaty co-productions?
We've had more applications with treaty co-productions in the last year than we've had at the last 20 years at the Rocket Fund. So that just kind of goes to show, one, the funding system currently available in all countries.
Yeah.
Children's media is having a bit of a rough go at the moment. It's a number of things. It's a lot of, the transition from broadcast to different platforms, everything going on with the platforms in the States. There's a lot going on. But partnership is sort of the way forward, especially when it comes to animation. They are massive budgets generally. But we're seeing New Zealand, Australia, we are seeing UK, France, Spain, Italy, India, pretty much everywhere and anywhere right now. And it's sometimes it works really well. Sometimes it's as a means to try and fund projects. But that is becoming, I'd say, a lot more common, especially in animation.
So Canada has co-production treaties with, I think, 60 countries. So
many,
yeah, and every one of them has different rules. So yeah, they can come from all over the place.
Yeah.
And they think that Canada has all the money, which, to our credit, we have an amazing system of public educational broadcasters in Canada. Yeah. They are one of the reasons why I would say Canada has exported so many children's programming. It's because of CBC and TVO and Knowledge and our French language broadcasters too. There's a lot of great content that's being commissioned in Canada for kids. And that kind of, especially in the kids space, it's brands, it's things that become toys. Like, it is easily exportable. And so that's also why a lot of other producers from different countries come to us to partner with, because we kind of have a reputation for creating great content.
Yeah, lots of great animators here, and lots of great tax credits too. So how can one get into the children's programming market if they've never produced kids' content? What do you think?
In Canada, there's a great thing with our execs, so you can kind of email them and pitch them. It's good to be prepared and know what they're looking for and whatnot, but there's kind of an open, like in terms of like if you have a great idea, people want to hear it. So I found a lot of success in just finding people's emails and emailing them and pitching them a great idea. I would just, for our company, a lot of every show that we've done started out as something for YouTube, and then eventually got picked up later on, or just stayed on YouTube and lived on YouTube. So just making content, make kids content, get to know kids, get to know how their brain works. And writing something for a 3-year-old is different than a 5-year-old, different than a 7-year-old. So really do your homework in terms of like child cognitive development. I would say get to know how to write for a kid. Like really know your stuff before you go and email someone randomly. But still, like do your homework, figure out what Michelle's looking for. Don't picture a puppet show.
Yeah, noted.
Figure out
pitch.
what the curriculum that they follow is. Like if you're pitching TVO in Ontario, they follow the Ontario curriculum. Like do a ton of homework, make some great stuff, have a calling card, and then go and introduce yourself at an event like this or something. But it's a really friendly industry for sure.
It definitely is. It's probably the friendliest that I've seen.
And it's quite small. That's the thing. Like the kids media industry is small, and it's really passionate people that love making kids and youth content. And so, everybody's pretty accessible. Everybody's open to chatting and, trying to educate people, kind of trying to help as much as possible. I would just echo on what Brandon said in terms of, the traditional way is usually broadcasters are the big one in Canada, reaching out to other production companies in terms of creating your content. And then there's the non-traditional way, the YouTube. We're seeing more and more kids' properties start with another version. So traditionally, series a lot of times or feature films were first because that's where the funding was. That's not a given anymore. It's more and more difficult to fund series and film in, children and youth right now. But there's a lot of opportunity in games, in publishing, in podcasts. So we're seeing a lot of properties where, producers can start on their own. We call it audience building often. It used to be the case that we would see applications that, had maybe been pitched to a broadcaster or two, but really weren't out there. Now we're seeing applications that come in that have a TikTok channel, a YouTube channel. They're already putting content out there. They're testing their market. That's a huge thing. Your audience is right there. In some cases, for the older age range, in terms of tweens and teens, you can get instant feedback. You can start putting things on social media platforms, on YouTube. If it's not costing you a lot, you can put things out, you can test audiences out there. We know of an animation company that has been doing animation for TikTok, and it's sort of been an experimental way for them to test new characters, get audience feedback, that sort of a thing. In the younger space, you're really looking at the secondary audience, which is their parents, their caregivers, that sort of a thing. So that's another audience you need to learn about, because a lot of times, in preschool and younger kids, you can't market directly to them. So you're looking at who are their parents, they're millennials, what are they into, what type of content. I think that's also why we're seeing a lot of these brands sort of, reboot, because they're playing to the parents and what, they were nostalgic about for when they were kids, and that they will then let their kids watch. So there's that sort of, duality, but we're seeing a lot of people just put things out there. And, we hear rumors about pitching execs in the US and them saying, we don't want your idea unless, somebody involved has several million followers on a platform. There's a way to build your audience, and there's a way to get that content out there. It's a little bit of a different model, but because in the kids space, we're in a bit of a digital era, and, that's where the kids are. Sometimes that is how you start building, your brand, your idea.
Okay, so I guess we've kind of touched on this in terms of nostalgia and having a brand already established, but what content, and I think this is particularly for you, Michele, what content tends to excel in your experience?
Well, for us, it's animation all the way. It does way better than the live action stuff, despite all of my efforts. Animation is king for our young audience. We've got shows that range in length from 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 7 minutes, up to 11 minutes. 22-minute shows for kids. Really, there's very few of them that are getting produced at that length anymore. Wild Kratts is one of the exceptions, but they just don't work as well as they used to. I guess kids have a shorter attention span, so short form content, and animation. So, and if you go on Knowledge Kids and you look at all of the different series that are there, you'll see a huge range in the quality of animation. Some of it is incredibly simple, and some of it is wonderfully complex. So we have kind of all ends of the budget spectrum that are represented in our programs. That applies for both the animation and the live action as well. So we have some little animated shows that were shot during COVID on someone's iPhone or whatever, super simple. We've got a super simple little tiny 26-part series called Where's My Alphabet? And kids go off looking for something in their house that starts with a particular letter, and it's a way of teaching kids the alphabet. And it was a COVID show, super low budget, and that was, that's a good sort of thing to think about if you're just starting out and you want to build a calling card is what kind of a simple show can I make for a low budget before I put forward my really big idea. So yeah, there's a wide range of stuff to look at there.
Okay, great. So we talked about different formats, but is there a preferred format for a preferred age group or for a specific age group, like 2-minute content, 7-minute content? Is there something that you look for specifically?
It isn't really age specific within our little small sort of 2 to 8 demo, but most of the shows are still 11 minutes, in that 11-minute range, and they come packaged 2 11s in a half hour. So that's still kind of the standard. But when you're actually building a linear channel, like an all-day broadcast schedule with no advertising, we do need those little short shows to fill the breaks in between the longer shows. So the shorts are valuable, and there's a whole market among public broadcasters who don't run any advertising and who acquire these kinds of shorts in high volume to help build their linear schedule.
I would say on YouTube making content for kids, there's also a case for really long content that you can sit your kid in front of. Seems to be working well as well. Just
Babysitter?
like a bit of a babysitter, or something that you trust. But it's also short form stuff that's strung together. It's not like one long monologue or something like that. But it will be like if you can find it. I'm a parent as well. If I can find a 1-hour video that while I can be there, but also like interact with, like I'll sit and watch with her. But it's like I don't need to keep finding 20 different videos. So it seems like there is a market for real long stuff too on YouTube for preschoolers.
Normally shorter shows kind of strung together.
Or it's just maybe one long episode, but it's like repurposed. Like there's a music video from an old episode. Like I think for kids you need to switch it up.
Like a long compilation.
Yeah, it's a long compilation, or at least if it is something that's created to be long, it is short segments still. Like it is like in focus group testing that I've done with content, switching up, like even multimedia, like switching from animation to live action or switching it up, it seems to keep kids engaged. But I am finding more and more like long form preschool videos too. It's like it's a 1-hour dancing compilation. You're like, great.
That actually
like,
sounds pretty great.
There's also hybrid models. We've had a couple examples of this that work both in animation and live action, and that you are delivering 2 different types of things for different platforms. So we've had animated series that are specifically for YouTube, but that are also re-edited into a feature film. We've also had live action feature films that are structured in a way that every scene can be a video on YouTube. So the concept is, if you put a 60-minute, 75-minute feature film on YouTube, your average 14-year-old is absolutely not going to watch it. But if you put 2.5-minute scenes back to back to back, they will watch that for 5 hours. Like it's a weird concept, but we're starting to see creators get really, unique ideas in terms of creating content for platforms that is traditional but also not traditional.
Isn't that interesting? I guess I will sit and watch 6 episodes of a show before I'll sit and watch a feature. So it's like the same thing. It feels like it's more easily digestible.
You wouldn't have watched a 10-hour movie, but you will binge 10 episodes.
Yes, gladly. So now the toughest part, getting to a green light. What do you all think makes a pitch special or stand out when you see it?
Bring money.
What if you have
bring a
none?
co-production partner. So Knowledge Network, I'm just going to preface this and maybe speak on behalf of some of my colleagues by saying that Knowledge Network is a very small regional broadcaster in the grand scheme of things in Canada. So we do not fund the development phase. We don't have any staff. I'm the whole kids department at Knowledge Network. So the way that our Canadian content is financed for the shows that we support is with a collaboration with other public broadcasters, most typically TVO and Knowledge Network in English, and TFO and SRC in French. And sometimes in a finance structure, you have all 4 of those Canadian broadcasters who are all throwing in their small license fees together in the hope that the combination of those license fees and CMF from one or the other of us is going to help propel that series forward. So Knowledge Network will look at a pitch for a kids show after it has already been through development, usually with someone else, SRC or TVO, and after it has a green light from one of those lead broadcasters. So that's just a bit of a caveat because we are small and our little license fee is not enough to get your project off the ground, but as a supplement to a bigger license from another broadcaster, we're an important part of the finance structure. So we do that a lot. We pre-license probably 5 or 6 series every year of varying lengths, anywhere, like I said, from 2 minutes to 22 minutes. And yeah, they come in after they've kind of been through that development phase, and I can see a Bible, a couple of scripts. Sometimes they come with an animation sample or a demo or a pilot of some sort. So that's when we get involved. So yeah, you could always start with TV Ontario. They do fund the development of a certain number of projects each year, yeah, that's how they come in by email or at events like this or whatever. People usually just email.
Becki, what do you think makes a pitch stand out?
So at the Rocket Fund, we're a little bit of a different funder because we're kids and youth focused. So we're a subjective fund. All the investment decisions are based on the strength of the creative and the understanding of their audience. And so, when we look at, what is going to be a really great show for kids. So there is a huge part of understanding who your audience is because, Gen Alpha, Gen Z is a little bit different than, what we grew up watching, who we are as kids. So having that understanding is really important. We've always, looked at projects that are specifically for underserved audiences. So we have that understanding of, kids want to see themselves on screen. And, we've made great strides in the kids industry in terms of representation, but we can only go further. And so, we're looking for really authentic stories. It's interesting that, very specific stories that come from somebody's personal, childhood, that sort of a thing, have a way of resonating and connecting because they're authentic. So that's something that, is really important for us. And just something that kids are going to want to watch. That's the other big thing is, there's so much content out there, and that's the tricky thing is, we believe that if the creative is really strong, it will find its audience no matter what. Finding your audience is the biggest struggle, I would say, in kids' content right now, just because there's so much content and there's so many ways to get it to kids. But, it's that, when the creative's strong, it's going to find its audience, absolutely.
Okay, so how do we make the creative strong? I know who to ask.
For sure. So for kids, I like to think of making content for kids. You're making something that's both a window and a mirror. So they see themselves in it, but they're getting to see themselves or see those types of characters do things that they've never gotten a chance to do or they might not get to do yet. Maybe they're looking forward to doing it later. So characters who are relatable and aspirational. I think kids' content is really characters. It's characters. Kids will connect with characters, and then yes, they'll take the education, but they're going to connect with the characters who are really great. So looking for characters that are going to resonate with kids and be something they look up to, someone they want to be friends with and be. And I think like Elmo is such a great example of like a character who's just filled with love, and you just connect with him because he loves everything, and little toddler there's love everything. Like he's so relatable to kids that age. He's a genius character, and he brings you a lot of education, but he's just love. So there's got to be something about that character that you're going to really connect with as a kid. You have to think, like, when you're pitching a broadcaster, you're pitching the broadcaster, you're pitching what parents are going to let kids watch. So there's another gatekeeper there. Ultimately, you're pitching that kid, and also you need to love it. Like, it needs to be like a Venn diagram of all those things right in the middle, because I've taken a lot of pitches, and you can tell when the person's just pitching what they think that you think you're going to want, and so they also need to believe it. So it's this crazy little like diagram that you have to hit, but it really if you care about it and that character is something that they're going to connect with and want to be, I think you're going to have a pretty good pitch. Then obviously there's got to be a good concept, but it's characters that kids are going to come back to. I think beyond the hook, it's just character. So character work. I do so much character workshop, I would say.
That's awesome. How important do you think is merchandising potential when looking at new content?
Depends on who you're pitching.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, like if you're pitching like a Spin Master or a toy company, then obviously that's the main thing they're looking for. So when you're making a toy show, you need to think about the play pattern. So there's what people often call toyetic programming, and so you're looking for the play pattern. So you're going to watch the show, and then you're going to go play as one of those characters. Arthur was a great show, but no one's watching Arthur and then going to go play Arthur on the playground. You're just going to watch Arthur, enjoy Arthur. But Paw Patrol, Paw Patrol has play patterns. It's vehicle play, it's role play. There's a cop and there's a firefighter, and there's dogs. Dogs are great too. It's like such a great conglomeration of all these things that are great play patterns. Rescue play, it's all there. So you need to think about like what's the play pattern of my show, and that's going to translate to toys ideally, and then that's going to translate to merchandise. So there's a different mindset, but I wouldn't pitch that to Michele. I'd pitch something that's got great educational value, because Michele's selling trust to parents. Paw Patrol does well on Knowledge Network, but what Knowledge Network brings that's great is the stuff that you're talking about. Is like we need more DEI. We need all these things in this programming for kids, and we need the gatekeepers who are looking out for that. So it depends on who you're pitching. I would say make the show that you want to make, and then figure out where it fits. Like if I've made shows where I'm like, there's a great play pattern here, I'm bringing it to Spin Master. So I think it depends on what the idea is, who the character is, and then what your ultimate goal is, and who you're pitching.
It also depends on the age and sort of where it fits in that range. Again, kids just consume content differently. So if they love something, they love it so much, and it reaches all the way to teens. And so, there's potential. And it's also a way of discoverability. I don't know about you guys, but Stitch is everywhere right now. My 8-year-old daughter is obsessed with Stitch. She's never seen the movie, but she has all of the clothes, she has all of the stuffies, and it's discoverability too. It's how my youngest daughter, who's 5, figured out what Mario was. She was obsessed with Princess Peach. She's never played it, never seen a movie. Yeah. It was because kids in her class were wearing Princess Peach shirts. So, it's all about the brand extensions. And so, that we see that in the, upper age range as, publishing to a degree. We're seeing a lot more graphic novels and, publishing-based brand extensions. As you get younger, it is more of that toys, things they can play with, costumes, that sort of a thing.
That's my son, who's 5, and obviously would never play Among Us, has heard and has become obsessed with, and he thinks it's called Among Us, and all he wants is Among Us stuff, and he has no idea what it is, but they hear about it and from the older kids, and that becomes the thing that they're obsessed with. So that's really interesting. Yeah, the discoverability of it, even if it's not from watching it or playing the games or whatever. So one more quick note or question about funding. Obviously, funding is hard to come by. What are some ideas that you might have for traditional or non-traditional sources of funding that you're seeing people take advantage of?
We see the widest variety of funding in kids. It is fascinating every time we get a new intake of applications, because producers are very innovative in finding ways to fund projects. One thing that we're seeing a lot of is proof of concepts. So traditionally, broadcasters used to pay for pilots. And, a lot of broadcasters do development, but they have limited resources. And so the digital series space in kids is sort of where we're seeing what we call proof of concepts. So basically, you're applying for production funding for, 5 2-minute episodes or a short amount of episodes, which is really your proof of concept. So we look at that as digital series funding, so you might be eligible depending on the length and other requirements to some of the other funders that fund digital series, but at the end of the day, you're really just funding a proof of concept that you can then take to broadcasters and pitch for a longer form. We're seeing some of the hybrid models, so, funding a series, but also a feature film. You can incorporate funding for both. We see, private funding, we see sponsorship, we see in-kind, we see arts funding, we see everything under the sun. It really is, because kids is in a bit of a weird space and it bridges a lot of different, we don't look at it necessarily as platform specific, but you have to sort of fund it in that way. It's interesting that you can fund a series, but also fund other aspects of it as well by merging some of the different funding and that sort of a thing. So, but yes, we do see a lot of the broadcasters working together. Everybody's friends in the kids' business will all work together, will all be a part of something. And yeah, it's really just finding out, one, what type of funding you can get. That's the other thing in kids, Sometimes you have a really great idea and you want to make a series, but sometimes the game component is actually, easier to fund first. So we're seeing a lot of producers kind of make that choice in terms of they have a really great IP idea, but in terms of what moves forward first is sort of funding based. And so if they're able to secure some funding for a game, which we do fund, which, we're seeing research grants in terms of technology, AI use, that sort of a thing. It's sometimes that's the first thing forward, and then they can build the audience from there and then move forward with a series, that sort of a thing.
Awesome, thank you so much. I guess we have time for some audience questions. We have a few minutes if anyone has any.
We got some questions. Excellent. I have one question on the Slido, and as I'm walking, I just want to do a shout out to Marie McCann, CBC Kids. If you want to see what our kids' content is, take a look on CBC Gem or on YouTube. The pitch email will be in the follow-up material. So with that.
Thank you. I'm glad I come and know this knowledge. Kids. I already sent it to my kids. So my question is about number because I'm coming from business affairs. So on YouTube, only 8,850 subscribers. So how is our revenue model or business model? How do we earn money about this one? And I found from CBC Kids couldn't have the link to click to go to Knowledge Kids. So what's the relationship between CBC Kids and our Knowledge Kids?
What is the link between CBC and Knowledge Kids?
Yeah,
so they're two different channels. Mm-hmm. CBC is across Canada and Knowledge Networks is just in BC. So our linear channel is only in British Columbia, but our video, which is on our app and our website, is across Canada. So two different channels. We're funded, Knowledge Network is funded by the BC provincial government, your tax dollars, and we also raise money through donations. So that's the difference between Knowledge and CBC. Two different channels, two different mandates as well.
And I can speak a bit to the monetization. So in terms of content that's coming from public broadcasters on YouTube, they cannot monetize that. because they're publicly funded. There's also a lot more rules around monetizing children's content, especially when it comes to ad revenue. So in terms of the lower age range and that sort of a thing, a lot of times, you know, if it's on Knowledge YouTube, there's no monetization.
So the regulatory regime that we live under only applies to our broadcast channel. Doesn't necessarily apply to our YouTube efforts, although right now, YouTube for us is just a promotional platform. It's not a platform where we deliver any long-form content. So Knowledge Kids several years ago made the decision to launch their streaming video app, and that's kind of the direction that we went in terms of securing those rights, which is different, for example, than TV Ontario, which has a very robust YouTube, TVO Kids YouTube channel. And when they do deals, they secure those YouTube rights. So their model, we both are broadcasters, we're both public educational broadcasters, but YouTube is kind of a differentiating point between us and them. So, yeah.
Good. Last question about the app. The app has more subscriber downloads, like 10,000. I just wonder, because the app is more practical for parents to keep kids watching that, right? So what's our support on the app?
So the app, the Knowledge Kids app is what we describe as the walled garden. It's all kids content, and it's not linked at all to Knowledge Network's primetime content, because we have a separate app for Knowledge Primetime, which is, you know, documentaries, dramas, factual programming. So once the kids are in our app, all the content has been vetted, it's all been, you know, approved, and it's a safe kind of space for them to watch. And
So I'm going to just ask a question from Slido. With AI, is the cost of animation decreasing?
I can speak to that. Right now, probably there are people doing a lot of content using generative AI, but I'm not, at least in our experience, it's not something that's being employed to a large scale in at least generative AI in Canadian animation. There's a lot of potential issues around generative AI in terms of copyright ownership, there's ethical considerations, and then a lot of buyers are specifically precluding the use of generative AI in animated content or all content. So right now it isn't, at least what I'm seeing at Thunderbird, it isn't really something that's affecting cost or guiding content creation right now.
But there will be some advances for sure, not specifically generative AI, but the use of AI in streamlining animation processes. It's not the only piece of technology that's streamlining animation processes. That's been something that's sort of been evolving over the past years, will continue to evolve to make animation cheaper, faster. There's a lot of motion capture going on right now. There's a lot of other ways other than AI to sort of make animation faster and cheaper. But AI will be, not necessarily generative AI, but AI will be incorporated into animation processes for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it already has been for ages. It's evolving quickly, and it is great in terms of efficiencies. But yeah, specifically generative AI is not really something that we're discussing right now.
Hi, Annette Riley. I too am a mom. I have a 14-year-old autistic ADHD child and a 2-year-old. What have I done to myself? So we actually watch a lot of Knowledge Network and always have, because I know that they're going to be learning, and I'm a big supporter of, if children are going to be in front of a TV, that they're going to learn something, right? Could you speak to a little bit, I look back to the prime live action children's stuff like Fred Penner, Mr. Dress Up, Polka Dot Door, Reading Rainbow, Mr. Rogers, all those. And most of them incorporated music into their programming. Could you speak a little bit to that musical element and whether or not you want to see that or don't want to see it in today's programming?
Sure. You want to start?
I make that content now, essentially. We found that, so with live action preschool, we put music in every single episode. We found that live action preschools kind of sells internationally to other English speaking territories, so that's fine, and it sells fine. We found with animation sometimes, as a producer who's trying to sell things internationally, often that was something that we were advised against because it was hard to dub over, which is a real shame because kids love music. So we did find that I do make that kind of live action content, and I do incorporate music, and it is a success. Like we do live shows and whatnot. So I mean, I'm a big advocate for music for sure in kids content.
Yeah, that's one of the filters. When I'm evaluating programming from around the world, I look at everything, including music, and one of my criteria is don't piss off the parents. If the parents can't watch this show, then neither will the kids. So it's got to have music, and it's got to be music that isn't going to, be like nails on a chalkboard, hopefully. But there is a lot of really incredible music, really great. In fact, we have some fantastic composers here in town. So, yeah.
So the next question from Slido is, can Becki please elaborate on funding games in terms of budget ranges and stipulations?
Sure. So from the Rocket Fund perspective, we are regulated by the CRTC. So we have a cap on what we can spend on non-programming interactive games, essentially. So the budgets that we are funding are usually at a prototype level. It's pretty small scale, but the CMF has funding available both for prototype production in terms of games. We are seeing some more funding, in the tech space. So there's research grants incorporating, different applications of AI and other different things within games. So there is, limited in terms of the media fund side. There's also other digital production or digital funding on the digital game side. But in terms of the scale that we're seeing, because we have, limited resources, it is fairly small scale. But again, with technology and with some of these companies, they're able to do a lot with small budgets. And I would say budgets in the range of like $500,000 to $1 million.
When I was a kid, one of my favorites was Uh-Oh. Is that a show?
Yeah.
A kids game type show. Is there still room for these type of shows, or is it all dominated by animation?
I've been pitching currently an Uh-Oh style game show, and I would say in Canada, they don't seem super receptive to it right now. But I would say I think those shows are kind of living on it's like The Floor is Lava show on Netflix, or like Is It Cake? Like kind of like buzzy game shows seem to be living as family game shows, I think. It seems like Netflix has kind of got the market on that a little bit. But I would say I hope there is room for an Uh-Oh in Canada if any broadcasters are looking for one.
What is Uh-Oh? What is it?
Yeah, what is that?
It was a silly game show. There's like sliming people. There's a weird like masked guard. It seems inappropriate for kids. And he would take you into a cage and slime you if your friend got the question wrong. It was it was a very fun, bright, gross kids show. I don't know if whoever asked this might have a better explanation, but it was on YTV. It was shot at the YTV studios, in Liberty Village.
I just wanted to mention, from a tax credit perspective, that game shows for kids are eligible for tax credits, because game shows for adults or for family viewing are not. So there's a decision tree in our guidelines to help you determine whether your show would be, it's not game show, it's in respect of a game questionnaire or contest. They are not eligible unless they are for children. Then they are eligible for tax credits. Just thought I'd mention that.
There's a question right
Learn
here.
how to avoid the slime.
Thank you. Is there a language requirement for kids content broadcasting in Canada? And like, if someone wanted to do a multicultural, like multilingual, like educational content for kids, is that something that broadcasters would look at?
So Knowledge Network is an English language broadcaster. We are regulated and we broadcast mostly in English, except for foreign language drama in prime time. But our kids' content is all in English. There are other multicultural channels that you can research and find. Rogers.
Yeah, so we've funded a lot of content that's not specifically English. It depends on your broadcaster. So there are some various broadcasters in Canada that will broadcast in other languages, and a lot of them are looking for family kids programming. So if that's the case, absolutely. We've also done a number of series which are language learning series. So it might be on an English language platform, but it's learning Mandarin or it's learning Aboriginal languages. So it's, yes, there's definitely, it's a question of what's your platform, who are your partners. There's also a couple of online platforms. So OSNAS is a SVOD platform that is specifically for non-English language kids, family, youth programming. So there's definitely markets there. And it is, especially in today's Canada, it is a huge thing in terms of, and that's something else we see in terms of animation. It's very easy to version your animation in multiple languages. So, it's easy to produce something and then deliver it in any language you want. So, yes.
I'm just going to add one thing. Is for CBC, we have experimented a little bit with different languages. And in particular, I'm thinking about, we do have a kids show called Silly Paws, which is in American Sign Language, and we have also experimented with no language. So those are just some of the experiments that we've tried out. Mostly they run on CBC Gem.
That's awesome. Well, it looks like we've just run out of time. It's just after 5 now, so thank you to this amazing panel. Thank you for having us here. It's been great seeing everyone.